Victor Ironfang's blood was still warm on my claws when I finally understood. The Hollow Creek forest burned with low flames around us, the air thick with smoke and war howls that echoed through the hills like ghosts waking up. My entire body trembled, not from fear, but from something I had never felt before. Something that wasn't rage, wasn't survival, wasn't the blind instinct to kill before being killed. It was choice. Elias stood a few feet in front of me, the medium-sized wolf with grayish-brown fur, giving way to the thin man with green eyes that I had spent weeks trying not to love. There was blood on his face, a deep cut on his temple, and he swayed as if the next gust of wind would knock him over. But he hadn't run. The alpha everyone called weak, the wood king who governed a den of rejects, had stayed. He had fought beside me. He had put his body between Ironfang's warriors and the pack of orphans and widows he had sworn to protect. And when Victor came to reclaim me, to drag back the weapon I had been, Elias didn't negotiate my surrender. He growled. The cross-shaped scar on my collarbone burned like branding iron, the ancient mark of the clan that had owned me for 28 years. But for the first time, the pain didn't control me. For the first time, I looked at an alpha and didn't see chains. I saw a home. Elias met my gaze through the smoke, those green eyes filled with something I couldn't yet name. His voice came out rough, broken with exhaustion. You stayed. It wasn't a question. It was a revelation. As if he too was understanding for the first time what I had chosen. I crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides, my massive hands cupping his face with a tenderness I didn't know I possessed. I stayed, and when our lips met, tasting of blood and ash and promise, I knew that the wolf who had been a weapon her entire life had finally found something worth fighting for. Not out of fear, out of love. If you want to know how I got to that moment, stick with me. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story. This journey is mine, but now it is yours too. To understand, you need to know who I was before Hollow Creek, before Elias, before discovering that even broken wolves can find a home. It all started with a letter I shouldn't have believed. The letter arrived on a stormy night, when I was hiding in a cave that smelled of moss and desperation. 3 weeks running. 3 weeks sleeping with one eye open, eating whatever I could hunt, avoiding roads and villages where the name Ironfang could mean my death sentence. My body was exhausted, but my inner wolf wouldn't let me rest. She smelled danger in every shadow, every snapping twig, every distant howl that could be a hunter from the clan I had abandoned. I wasn't a common fugitive. I was lost property, and Victor Ironfang didn't forgive those who stole what was his. The messenger found me by chance, or perhaps by fate. An old solitary wolf who traversed the lands between territories, delivering news and letters to anyone who could pay. He looked at me with those yellowish eyes of someone who had seen too much and decided not to care about any of it. "You're too big to hide for long," he said, throwing an envelope at my feet. "Maybe this will help." He disappeared before I could ask who had sent it. The letter was short, written in careful, almost delicate handwriting that seemed strange coming from an alpha. To those who need silence, Hollow Creek does not ask where you came from. It does not demand proof of strength or blood oaths. If you seek a place to rest, the doors are open. Elias Wood, Alpha of Hollow Creek. I read it 3 times, expecting to find the trap hidden between the words. Alphas didn't offer refuge. Alphas demanded obedience. Alphas took what they wanted, and discarded what no longer served them. I knew this better than anyone. I carried the proof etched into my skin, but I was tired. So tired that the possibility of a trap seemed almost preferable to another night of running. Hollow Creek was a 4-day journey south, small territory, insignificant on the maps of the great clans. I had heard of it once or twice, always with disdain. The den of the weak, the kingdom of the Wood Alpha, a place where broken wolves went to die in peace. Maybe that was exactly what I needed. I arrived in the valley on the 5th day, as the sun began to set behind the hills. Hollow Creek was unlike any territory I knew. There were no stone walls or watchtowers, no armed guards patrolling the borders, just a gentle valley covered in tall grass, a stream winding among the trees, and the smell of domestic hearth smoke drifting on the cold air. It seemed too peaceful to be real. The Alpha's cabin stood in the center of the valley, surrounded by a garden that still showed signs of life despite the advanced autumn. It was a simple structure of dark wood and a slanted roof, with an attached workshop, from which a rhythmic, soft sound came. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of a knife carving wood. I approached slowly, every muscle in my body tense, ready for the fight that would surely come. My inner wolf growled softly, suspicious of so much calm. The workshop door opened before I reached it, and there he was. Elias Wood was nothing like I expected. He was thin, not the thinness of someone starving, but the thinness of someone who was never built for battle. Shoulders slightly slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight. Slender hands covered in small cuts and sap stains, the hands of a craftsman, not a warrior. Disheveled brown hair falling over green eyes that studied me with a quiet curiosity. He was at least a foot shorter than me, maybe more. "You came," he said, as if he had been expecting me, as if my arrival were the most natural thing in the world. "You're the Alpha?" The question came out more aggressive than I intended. My voice always sounded like that. Years of training to sound menacing had become so ingrained that I no longer knew how to speak otherwise. Elias didn't look offended. He just nodded, tucking the carving knife into his apron. "I am. And you are the wolf running from Iron Fang Ridge." My entire body stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Your scent." He tilted his head, sniffing the air with a subtlety I almost missed. Iron and snow, and something else. Ancient fear. The kind that gets woven into the bones. No one had ever read my scent like that. With such precision. With such calm. If you know where I came from, you know what I am. I lifted my chin, bracing for rejection. A discarded weapon. Lost property. Victor Ironfang will come for me sooner or later. Anyone who shelters me becomes a target. Elias considered my words for a moment. His green eyes scanned my face, my shoulders, my hands full of calluses and scars. Not with fear, not with desire, with something that looked strangely like recognition. "Then let him come," he finally said. "Hollow Creek does not surrender its own. I am not yours." "No." He took a step to the side, opening the way to the cabin. "But you can be ours, if you wish. The Pack's. Your own." A pause. "The choice is yours. It always will be. Choice." The word sounded strange in my ears. I hadn't made choices since I could remember. I took orders. I obeyed. I survived. "I didn't come to be your female," I said, because I needed to make it clear. Because I had been offered to other alphas before, always as a bargaining chip, always as a trophy or a weapon. Elias let out something that almost sounded like a laugh. "I didn't ask for a female. I offered a refuge. They are different things." He entered the cabin without waiting for my reply, leaving the door open behind him. The interior was warm. A fireplace crackled in a corner, filling the air with the smell of burning resin and something sweet that might be baking bread. There were books piled on a table, carving tools hanging on the wall, small wooden figures decorating shelves like a miniature forest. It was the opposite of everything I knew. No weapons in sight, no battle trophies. Just domestic peace, and the simple comfort of a house that was a home, not a fortress. "The extra room is in the back," Elias said, putting water on to boil. "It has a bed, blankets, a window that looks out onto the forest. If you prefer to sleep elsewhere, there are empty cabins in the valley. I sleep on the floor." He looked at me over his shoulder, one eyebrow raised. "There's a perfectly good bed waiting." "I sleep on the floor," I repeated, "with my back to the wall. That way I can see the door." Something crossed his green eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or sadness. But he merely nodded. "As you prefer." That night, while Elias slept in his room and the cabin filled with silence, I sat in the farthest corner of the main room, my back against the wooden wall, a knife clutched in my hand. My inner wolf paced, restless, sniffing the new territory. There was something strange in the air. Something she couldn't identify. It wasn't danger. It wasn't threat. It was something else. His scent was everywhere. Freshly cut wood, resin, cold smoke, linseed oil. It was a good scent, comforting in a way I didn't understand. I closed my eyes, forcing my body to relax just a little. Tomorrow I would decide whether to stay or keep running. Tomorrow I would find out if Elias Wood was truly different, or just another alpha hiding his claws. But that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept for more than 3 hours straight. And when I woke to the sound of the carving knife working in the workshop next door, something in me hesitated before raising my guard again. 3 days in Hollow Creek, and I still hadn't found the trap. This made me nervous. Traps always existed. The only question was where they were hidden and when they would be sprung. I had learned that lesson too early, etched in blood and scars that would never disappear. But Elias demanded nothing. He didn't give me orders. He didn't touch me. He didn't look at me the way other alphas looked, calculating my value as a weapon or a breeding female. He simply existed around me, carving his wooden figures, tending the garden, preparing meals that he left on the table without demanding thanks. It was disconcerting. I spent the mornings patrolling the valley perimeter, my inner wolf too restless to stay still. The territory was small, but well-positioned. Hills to the north and east offered natural protection. The stream provided clean water and washed away scent trails. The forest to the south was dense enough for ambushes, but also for escape. A good place to hide. A terrible place to defend. On the 4th day, I discovered I wasn't alone on patrols. "You wake up early." Elias's voice caught me by surprise. He was leaning against a tree at the edge of the clearing, his hands in his pockets, looking completely relaxed, as if he hadn't just approached a wolf trained to kill without her noticing. "How did you do that?" "Do what?" "Get close without me sensing you." He shrugged, a slight smile playing at the corner of his lips. "You were too focused on looking outward. Sometimes danger comes from where we least expect it." It wasn't a threat. It was an observation. Maybe even advice. That irritated me more than a threat would have. "I don't need lessons." "I know." He pushed off the tree, walking toward me with that infuriating calm that seemed to be his natural state. "You are probably the best warrior who has ever set foot in this valley. I've seen how you move, how you observe, how your body is always ready for combat." I waited for the but. There was always a but. "But no one here is going to attack you, Raine. At least not the pack." He stopped a few feet away, respecting my space in a way other alphas never did. "You can rest sometimes. It's not weakness. Rest is how you die. Rest is how you live." His green eyes met mine, and there was something there I couldn't decipher. "Have you ever experienced the difference?" I didn't answer. I had no answer to give. The attack came that very afternoon. I was in the garden, pulling weeds because I needed to keep my hands busy, when the smell hit me. Rotten. Sickly. Wrong in a way that made my inner wolf instantly rise in alarm. Then I heard the scream. A child. High-pitched. Terrified. My body moved before my mind processed the decision. I leaped over the rows of vegetables, knocking down low fences, following the sound to the edge of the property where a girl, perhaps 6 years old, was cornered against a tree. The creature before her wasn't a normal wolf. It was too big, too thin, with fur falling out in clumps and eyes that glowed with a sickly yellow. Foam drooled from its jaws, and every breath produced a wet, guttural sound that spoke of disease and madness. Rage wolf. Corrupted. Beyond saving. Elias appeared running from the other side, a staff in his hand, positioning himself between the creature and the girl. Brave. Stupid. He didn't stand a chance. The creature lunged. I intercepted. The transformation was partial, just enough to give me claws and strength. I felt the bones of my face lengthen, the muscles in my arms swell, the skin itch where gray fur began to sprout. The world became sharper, slower, every detail magnified. I grabbed the creature by the neck before it could reach Elias. I threw it aside with enough force to send it rolling several yards. It got up, snarling, and came again. This time, I was ready. I dodged the first bite, spun, sinking my claws into its flank. Black blood gushed out. The creature howled in pain and fury, trying to reach me with fangs that could tear off my arm. I held it, muscles trembling with the effort, and twisted. The snap of its spine echoed through the clearing. The creature fell limp in my hands. Dead. I dropped the body, breathing heavily, my transformation slowly receding, claws retracting, fur disappearing, bones settling back into place with pops that still hurt after so many years. When I turned, I found eyes watching me. The girl was clutching Elias's legs, face hidden, trembling. But it wasn't her that held my attention. It was him. Elias looked at me without fear, without revulsion, without that calculating expression of someone who had just found a useful weapon. There was surprise in his green eyes, respect, and something softer that I couldn't name. "Thank you," he said simply. I didn't know what to do with gratitude. I had been trained to take orders, not thanks. "Is she all right?" Elias looked down at the girl in his arms, stroking her hair with those craftsman hands that seemed made for comfort. "She's scared, but whole, thanks to you." People were starting to appear at the edge of the clearing. Pack members, drawn by the sounds of the fight. They looked at me, at the creature's body, at the blood on my hands. I knew that look. It was the same one I had received my whole life. "Monster." "Let's go inside," Elias said, his voice cutting the silence. It wasn't an order, it was an invitation. "You need to clean those hands." He didn't leave me alone with the stairs. He didn't use me as an example or a threat. He simply guided me back to the cabin, the girl still clutching him, as if I were just another person who needed care. That night, we sat before the fireplace, the fire crackling low, the smell of herbs drying in the air. The sound of the carving knife had returned. Tap, 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 rhythmic, constant, strangely comforting. "Why do you fight like that?" Elias's question caught me off guard. I was watching the fire, letting my mind wander in a way I rarely allowed myself. "Like what?" "Like you have nothing to lose." He didn't stop carving. His eyes focused on the small wooden figure taking shape in his hands. "I've seen many warriors in my life. Most fight to survive. You fight as if you are already dead." Silence stretched between us. I should have lied, should have given some vague answer and changed the subject. Instead, I told the truth. My father trained me since I could stand. Said my size was a gift, that I was born to be a weapon. I looked at my hands. So large, so marked. The Iron Fang clan bought me when I was 15. Victor paid a good price for a wolf who could take down 3 warriors alone. Elias stopped carving. "Bought you?" It's what they do. Buy, sell, trade. Strong wolves are valuable commodities in the north. I touched the collar of my tunic, where the cross-shaped scar was hidden. They branded me as property. 13 years carrying that symbol. 13 years being Victor Ironfang's weapon. The fire crackled. A log shifted, sending sparks upwards. "And now you fled." Now I fled. I finally looked at him, expecting to see pity or horror or maybe even belated fear. I killed 2 guards to get out. Victor won't forget. He never forgets. Elias held my gaze for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he went back to carving. "Do you know why they call me the weak alpha?" The change of subject confused me. "Because you don't look like a warrior." "In part." His smile was bitter at the edges. "My father was the alpha before me. A brutal man who believed strength was measured in spilled blood. He wanted me to be like him, to rule with an iron fist. Tap, tap, tap. I refused. When he died, I took over the pack and changed everything. I opened the doors to those other clans rejected. Orphans, widows, abused omegas, wolves who were unfit for war." A pause. "The Cross Hill Council calls me the Wood King. They say I rule a den of the weak and the failures. And do you care what they say?" Elias held up the figure he was carving. A small, delicate fox, with alert ears and a sweeping tail. "Foxes look fragile," he said, "but they survive wolves, bears, winters, and hunters. They survive because they are smart, not because they are strong." His green eyes met mine. "Brute strength is not the only form of power, Raine. Sometimes true strength is choosing not to destroy." I had no answer for that. No one had ever given me permission not to destroy. Silence returned, but different now. Less heavy, almost comfortable. When I finally stood up to go sleep in my corner, Elias spoke one last time. "The girl you saved today. Her name is Mira. Her mother died last winter. Her father disappeared before she was born. A pause. You are the first person she has let touch her since she arrived here. I looked at him, confused. I didn't touch her. You protected her. For some of us, that is the same thing. I lay down in my corner that night with my mind more restless than my body. The scar on my collarbone itched, as it always did when I thought about the past. But there was something else now. Something new forming beneath the layers of distrust and fear I had built over years. Elias's scent was everywhere. Wood, resin, cold smoke. And for the first time, my inner wolf didn't snarl at it. She paid attention. 3 weeks passed after Cross Hill. 3 weeks where I avoided being alone with Elias. 3 weeks where I kept a physical distance, sleeping in the empty cabin he had offered instead of the corner of the main room, patrolling the perimeter for hours on end. 3 weeks where his scent haunted me. No matter where I went. In the forest, I smelled wood and resin. By the stream, cold smoke. On my own skin, even after scrubbing until I was raw, there remained a trace of him that my inner wolf refused to forget. It was maddening. Elias didn't press. He didn't ask why I had withdrawn. He just kept existing in that infuriating calm, carving his figures, tending to the pack, treating me with the same kindness as always, as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't trembled in that workshop. I was almost convincing myself that I had imagined everything when the messenger arrived. It was early morning, the sun still fighting to break through the gray clouds, when the smell hit my nose. Wolf, foreign. And beneath that, something that froze my spine. Iron. Snow. Old blood. Iron Fang. I met the messenger at the edge of the valley, a thin, grayish-furred wolf who trembled when he saw me. He was young, perhaps 17, and carried the same fear in his eyes that I knew intimately. A slave, as I had been. Are Raine Holt? His voice cracked. Who asks? Instead of answering, he held something out to me. A braided leather necklace, with small wolf claws attached at regular intervals. Stained. Worn. Unmistakable. My brother's war collar. The world seemed to tilt. Where did you get that? He gave it to me. Your brother. Kyle. The messenger swallowed hard. He's dying. Battle wounds that won't heal. He asked me to find you. Asked you to come back. The scar on my collarbone began to burn. Not the mild heat I felt when I thought of the past. A real pain. As if someone were pressing hot iron against my skin. Kyle. My older brother. The only member of my family still left. The one I had left behind when I fled Iron Fang Ridge because he refused to come with me. It's a trap, I said, more to myself than to the messenger. Victor wants me back. He's using Kale as bait. Maybe. The boy didn't try to lie. But your brother is really dying. I saw the wounds. Saw the blood he coughs up. A pause. He said you were the only person he trusted to end it. End it. Not to save him. To give him a clean death, away from Victor's hands. The kind of death Iron Fang wolves never received. The messenger left before I could ask more questions, disappearing into the forest as if he feared I would attack him. I stood in the clearing for a long time, Kale's collar weighing in my hands like a sentence. I didn't want to go back. Every cell in my body screamed to ignore the message, burn the collar, pretend it never happened. Iron Fang Ridge was the place where my humanity had been stripped away piece by piece, the place where I had learned that wolves like me didn't deserve kindness, choice, or love. But Kale, he had protected me when we were children. Taken beatings in my place, shared food when there wasn't enough for two. He was the only person I had ever loved before. Before. The decision was already made. Perhaps it had been made the moment I saw the collar. I found Elias in the workshop, carving a new figure in the faint morning light. He looked up when I entered, and something in my face must have shown what I felt, because his hands stopped in midair. What happened? I told him. Everything. The messenger. The collar. Kale. The near certainty that it was a trap set by Victor. I told it all at once, without pauses, because if I stopped talking, I wouldn't be able to continue. When I finished, Elias was silent for a long moment. You're going, he finally said. It wasn't a question. I have to. I know. He placed the wooden figure on the workbench, standing up. "When do you leave?" "At dawn. I need time to—" "No." Elias shook his head. "You go now, before you change your mind, before the guilt turns into fear." He knew me too well, better than I had allowed. "Elias, you don't owe me explanations, Raine. You don't owe me promises." He walked to a shelf at the back of the workshop, looking for something. "You came here seeking silence. I offered a refuge. I never demanded you stay." The words should have relieved me. Instead, they tore something in my chest. "I don't know if I'll come back." Elias stopped moving. For a second, just 1 second, I saw something break behind those green eyes. Then he turned, holding a small wooden figure in his hands. The fox. The same one he had shown me weeks ago, talking about survival and silent strength. But now it was complete. Every detail perfect, the sweeping tail looking ready to move. "If you ever decide to stay," he said, placing the fox in my hands. "For real, not out of lack of options. Put this over the door of my house." His eyes met mine. "That way everyone will know you chose, that this refuge survived everything." I looked at the small wooden figure. It was light, delicate, carved with the same care he devoted to everything. "Why do you do this?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why do you care about me?" You know what I am. I know what you were forced to be." Elias took a step toward me, and his scent enveloped me like a blanket. "It is not the same thing." The air between us grew thick again, that impossible warmth rising up my spine, making my inner wolf howl in a way I had never heard. I should have backed away. It was what I had done for the last 3 weeks. Instead, I stood still as Elias raised his hand and touched my face. The touch was light, just the tips of his fingers tracing the line of my jaw, but my entire body reacted as if struck by lightning. "Come back," he whispered. "When you can. If you want to." I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice. I left before the sun fully rose. I shifted at the edge of the valley, letting my wolf take over completely. She was faster than me in human form, more resilient, more capable of covering the distance to Ironfang Ridge in time. I ran, through forests and hills and icy streams, the wind cutting my gray fur, the world becoming a blur of scents and sounds. My inner wolf was silent for the first time in weeks, focused only on movement, on direction, on the need to arrive. But beneath that focus, something ached. With every step that took me farther from Hollow Creek, the tightness in my chest grew. It wasn't fear of what awaited me. It wasn't anxiety about the trap that was surely set. It was something else, something I had no name for. Longing, perhaps, for a place I had barely known, for a man I hadn't allowed to know me. Hollow Creek's scent disappeared completely on the second day of travel. I stopped in a clearing to rest, shifting back to human form, my body sore in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. I took the wooden fox from the pocket where I had hidden it. It was so small, so delicate, so different from everything I was. "If you ever decide to stay." Elias's voice echoed in my memory, and something warm and terrible opened in my chest. I put the fox away again, deeper, safer, and I continued running north, toward the place where my nightmares lived, carrying in my pockets the only proof that someone, somewhere, was waiting for me to return. Ironfang Ridge hadn't changed. The frozen mountains still cut the sky like broken teeth. The wind still howled between the peaks with a voice that seemed made of lament. And the smell, that smell of iron and old blood and fear that permeated every stone, still hit me like a punch to the stomach when I crossed the territory border. My entire body wanted to flee. Every instinct screamed to turn back, run back south, to the forest, to the valley where the air smelled of wood and resin instead of death. But I had come for Kale, and Ironfang wolves didn't run twice. I found my brother in a cave on the territory limits, far from the main fortress where Victor ruled. He was lying on dirty furs, his body too thin, his face gray with fever and pain. The wounds were worse than the messenger had described. Deep cuts that wouldn't close, broken ribs that pierced the skin underneath, a smell of rot that told me, even before I examined him, that there was no salvation. "You came." Kyle's voice was a hoarse whisper. "I thought you wouldn't." "I thought so too." I sat beside him, holding his hand as I hadn't since we were children. He was burning up with fever, his eyes glazed, but he recognized my touch. Does Victor know you're here? Probably. The messenger was one of his. Trap. Cale tried to smile, but the movement turned into a grimace of pain. I warned the boy, told him not to tell, but they have ways of making people talk. I knew. I knew all the ways. Why didn't you come with me? The question escaped before I could contain it. When I fled, you could have come. And leave who behind? Cale closed his eyes. You were strong enough to survive alone. The others weren't. Someone needed to stay to protect them. And who protected you? Silence. I spent 2 days in that cave, tending Cale's wounds, knowing that nothing I did would change the outcome. On the 3rd day, he told me about the others. There weren't many. 12 perhaps. Wolves too young or too weak to be useful as warriors. Women who had lost value in Victor's eyes. Children who would be marked and sold as soon as they were old enough. And one girl, Riley. Cale described her, his voice breaking. 9 years old. Huge eyes that no longer cried. Back already marked with whips. Training starting early to turn her into the same kind of weapon I had been. Get her out of here, Cale asked on the last night, as the fever finally consumed him. The others, if you can. But her, she reminds me of you. Before everything. I promised. And when Kyle closed his eyes for the last time, when his heart finally stopped fighting, I kept my promise. The escape was brutal. I won't describe the details. Some horrors don't need to be relived in words. Suffice it to say that I killed 4 guards to reach Riley and the others. That I carried the girl on my back for 3 days because she was too weak to run. That I lost 2 of those I tried to save to Victor's hunters before crossing the southern border. But 10 survived. 10 broken wolves I guided through forests and mountains, following a scent I had memorized without realizing it. Wood, resin, cold smoke, the smell of home. We reached Hollow Creek on a stormy night. I could barely stand. My body was covered in injuries, some deep enough to show bone. Riley trembled in my arms, half frozen, her eyes closed. The others stumbled behind, more dead than alive. When I collapsed at the entrance to the valley, it was Elias who found me. I saw him through the rain, running toward me with a lantern in his hand, his brown hair plastered to his face, his green eyes wide with shock. Raine. My name in his voice sounded like a prayer. Raine, she needs warmth. I pushed Riley into his arms, my voice failing. The others too. Take care of them. And you? I didn't finish the sentence. The world went dark, and I fell. I woke up 3 days later in Elias's cabin, covered in blankets and bandages, his scent everywhere. Yrsa, the pack healer I had barely known before I left, was sitting beside me. She had white hair and steady hands that had stitched my wounds while I was unconscious. You almost died, she said bluntly. Blood loss, hypothermia, infection in at least 3 wounds. Elias didn't leave your side for 2 days. I tried to sit up, but my body protested with a sharp pain that made me fall back. The others. Riley. Where? All alive. Weak. Traumatized. But alive. Yrsa gently pushed me back onto the pillows. The girl won't let go of Elias's hand. She seems to have decided he is safe. Something warm spread through my chest. Where is he? Meeting with the council. Yrsa's tone darkened. Mark Hallow is demanding that the new refugees be expelled. Says attracting Ironfang's wrath will destroy the entire valley. I got up before she could stop me. I stumbled to the community hall, ignoring the pain that tore through my body with every step. The meeting was already underway when I arrived, elevated voices echoing off the wooden walls. Suicide! Mark Hallow stood in the center, his face red with rage. Victor Ironfang is not just any alpha. He will raise this valley to reclaim what is his. They are not his. Elias's voice was calm, but firm in a way I hadn't heard before. They are people, wolves, and now they are ours. Ours? Mark let out a cruel laugh. Look around, Wood. You rule a band of widows, orphans, and cripples. What will you do when Ironfang shows up? Throw your little wooden figurines at them? If necessary. The silence that followed was heavy. Mark shook his head. The Cross Hill Council suggests a simple solution. Hand over the refugees and the giant female who brought them. Avoid war before it starts. No. Would. No. Elias stood up, and there was something in his posture that I had never seen. Something that made my inner wolf lift her head in recognition. Whoever touches anyone in Hollow Creek touches me, and I do not surrender my pack. You will condemn everyone to death because of one Iron Fang wolf? I will protect my people. Elias looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every pack member. That is what alphas are for. Mark snorted, turning to leave. When Victor arrives, remember you had a choice. He walked past me at the door, his eyes widening briefly in surprise, but he didn't stop. He was too hurried to flee. Elias saw me a second later. Raine. He crossed the hall in long strides, stopping inches from me. You should be resting. Your injuries. I heard what you said. He was silent. You're going to risk everything. I continued, my voice failing. For me. For strangers. For a war that isn't yours. It's not mine? Something flashed in his green eyes. You are my pack now, Raine. All of you are. And I do not abandon mine. The word echoed in my chest. Mine. Not in the sense of possession, in the sense of belonging. Victor arrived 5 days later. Scouts spotted the Iron Fang force crossing the northern border at dawn. 30 warriors at least. Warwolves trained to destroy. And leading them all, Victor Iron Fang in his human form, smiling as if he had already won. I wasn't fully healed yet. My wounds protested every movement. But when Elias started organizing the valley's defense, I didn't hesitate. You need to stay back, he said, when he saw me picking up a sword. No. Raine, he came for me. I met his eyes, letting him see the truth I had hidden for weeks. If I surrender, maybe. No. The word came out as a growl. Low. Alpha. Elias held my face between his craftsman hands, his green eyes burning with an intensity that took my breath away. You will not surrender. You will fight beside me. And when we are done, you will place that fox over my door and tell me you are staying. A pause. Do you understand? I should have argued. I should have insisted that my life wasn't worth the risk to so many others. Instead, I nodded. The battle happened in the main clearing of the valley. Elias had prepared the ground carefully. Traps hidden under leaves, elevated positions for archers, escape routes for those who couldn't fight. He knew every tree, every stone, every advantage the forest could offer. Iron Fang's warriors were stronger, more numerous, more brutal. But Hollow Creek had something they didn't expect. It had an alpha who fought not for power, but for love. I saw Elias transform for the first time when Victor broke through the defense lines. His wolf was smaller than Iron Fang's, grayish-brown fur, unimpressive at first glance. But he fought as if every member of the pack were his own flesh and blood. Because they were. When Victor finally found me, I was waiting. He came in wolf form, enormous, black fur stained with blood, yellow eyes shining with fury. Behind him, 2 of his best warriors. You cost me dearly, bitch. His voice was a distorted snarl from the partial shift. I will take you back in pieces. I didn't answer with words. I answered with claws. The fight was brutal. Victor was more experienced, crueler, and I was still weakened. He knocked me down twice, tore my flank, nearly ripped out my throat. But then I heard it. A howl. Not of pain or fear, of defiance, of protection. Elias. He burst out of nowhere, his medium-sized wolf colliding with one of Victor's warriors, jaws clamping down on the enemy's neck. He wasn't big enough to win. He wasn't strong enough to survive. But he fought anyway. For me. Something broke inside me. Or perhaps it mended. The scar on my collarbone burned one last time, so strong I almost screamed. But it wasn't pain. It was liberation. I lunged at Victor with everything I had. I didn't fight as the weapon Iron Fang had created. I fought as the wolf Hollow Creek had taken in, with fury, with purpose, with something I finally recognized by name. Love. Victor fell under my claws as the sun began to set. I didn't kill him. Part of me wanted to. The part that remembered every scar, every humiliation, every piece of humanity torn away. But Elias had taught me that there were other forms of strength. Leave. I said, standing over him, my claws ready to finish the job. Go back to Ironfang. Tell everyone what happened here. And if you or any of yours ever steps foot in this valley again, I won't stop. Victor looked at me with pure hatred, but also with something else. Fear. He left before dawn, dragging the survivors of his force. Most of his warriors had fallen or fled. Hollow Creek had won. I found Elias at the edge of the clearing when the battle ended. He was in human form again, covered in blood and dirt, a deep cut across his forehead, but alive, gloriously, impossibly alive. You stayed, he said when I approached. I stayed. I crossed the distance between us in 3 steps. My massive hands cupped his face with a tenderness I didn't know I possessed. And when our lips met, tasting of blood and ash and promise, I knew that the wolf who had been a weapon her entire life had finally found something to live for. Not out of fear, out of choice. The days after the battle were filled with silence and healing. Hollow Creek buried its dead with howls that echoed through the valley until dawn. They weren't many, but every loss weighed heavily. Every name spoken during the rites carried the weight of a life that had chosen to stay, that had fought, that had believed this small valley of rejects was worth the sacrifice. I didn't know most of them, but I cried anyway, because now they were mine too. On the first night of peace, I found Elias in the workshop. He was sitting on the workbench, his bandaged hands resting in his lap, looking at the carving tools as if he no longer knew what they were for. The cut on his forehead had been stitched by Yrsa, an uneven line that would leave a scar. One more mark to carry. You should be sleeping, I said from the doorway. You too. I walked in slowly, sitting beside him on the bench. Our shoulders almost touched. His scent enveloped me as it always did. Wood and resin and cold smoke. But now there was something else. Dried blood. Sweat. Exhaustion. The smell of someone who had given everything and didn't know if anything was left. Let me see your hands. He didn't protest when I took his wrists, unrolling the dirty bandages. The wounds underneath were ugly. Deep cuts on his fingers, burns where he had held a flaming torch during the battle, scratches that ran up to his elbows. A craftsman's hands destroyed defending what he loved. I began to clean the wounds with water and herbs that Yrsa had left. Elias watched me in silence, those green eyes following my every movement. You fought well, he finally said. You too. I almost died, but you didn't. I looked at him, letting him see the truth in my eyes. You stayed. You fought. You led. That is what matters. Something crossed his face. Doubt, perhaps, or the weight of expectations he had never asked to carry. They still call me the weak alpha, he murmured. Even after all this, Mark and the others, they say I only won because I had you. So what? Elias blinked, surprised. So what? I finished bandaging his hands, holding them between mine. You had me. You have the pack. You have people who chose to fight by your side not because you forced them, but because you welcomed them. I squeezed his fingers gently. That's not weakness, Elias. It's the kind of strength wolves like Victor will never understand. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he raised one of his bandaged hands and touched my collarbone. The place where the cross-shaped scar was hidden beneath my tunic. My entire body stiffened. Tell me, he asked softly, what it really means. I could have lied. I could have pulled away, changed the subject, rebuilt the walls he had spent months tearing down. Instead, I pulled the collar of my tunic aside. The scar was ugly, thick lines of burnt tissue forming an uneven cross, the mark Victor used to identify his property. I had carried it for 13 years. I had learned to hate it, to hide it, to pretend it didn't exist. Elias studied it in silence. His bandaged fingers traced the edges with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. They marked me when I was 15, I said, my voice hoarse, in front of the whole pack, so everyone would know I wasn't a person. I was an object, a weapon that belonged to Victor Ironfang. Elias said nothing. He just kept touching the scar with that strange reverence, as if he were memorizing every line. I always hated this mark, I continued. Always wanted to rip it off, burn it, do anything to forget what it meant. And now, I looked at him, at those green eyes that had seen me fight, bleed, break, and rebuild myself, who had never looked at me with fear or disgust, only with something I finally had the courage to name. Now I understand that it doesn't define me. I covered his hand with mine. I am more than the mark they gave me. I am what I choose to be. Elias was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. The last mark you accept has to be by choice. His eyes met mine. And if you let me, I want it to be mine. The air between us grew thick. I knew what he was asking for. The Luna's mark. The symbol of the bond between alpha and mate. A bite on the shoulder that would mean forever. That I had chosen to belong to him just as much as he belonged to me. Not as property. As an equal. Yes. The word came out before I could doubt it. Elias kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was urgent, desperate, filled with everything we hadn't said in the weeks of distance and fear. His bandaged hands held my face. My massive hands found his waist, and for a moment the whole world narrowed down to the warmth between our bodies. When we separated, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "Stay," he whispered. "Forever. Stay." I was already staying. I smiled against his lips. "From the moment you weren't afraid of me." The ceremony took place a week later. It wasn't grand or elaborate. Just the pack gathered in the main clearing. Torches lit around us, the starry night sky above. Elias waited for me in the center, wearing the simplest tunic he owned, his hands still bandaged but already healing. I walked toward him with firm steps, without fear, without doubt, for the first time in my life, choosing my own destiny. The vows were simple, promises of protection, of loyalty, of love chosen instead of imposed. When Elias bit my shoulder, sealing the bond with a mark I would carry with pride, I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer anyone's weapon. I was Luna of Hollow Creek, mate to the alpha the world called weak, protector of all the broken wolves who found their way to our valley. And when the pack howled in celebration, I raised my voice with theirs. The years passed like water running through the stream. Hollow Creek grew, not in power or territory, but in something more important. Families, children, laughter that echoed among the trees where before there had only been silence and fear. The refugees kept coming, abused wolves from other clans, humans rejected by their villages, children without parents, women without hope. All found a place in our valley, all found a home. Riley was the first, but not the last. She grew up strong and fierce, the scars on her back fading with time, the fear in her eyes giving way to a determination that reminded me of myself. I trained her to fight. Elias taught her to build. Together, we taught her that strength and kindness were not opposites. They were complements. One autumn afternoon, many years after the battle, I found Elias on the porch of our house. The cabin had grown over time, rooms added to accommodate the life we built together. The workshop was still there, full of tools and wooden figures. The garden had tripled in size, and above the door, where I had placed it the day after the ceremony, the wooden fox kept its silent vigil. Elias was carving, as always. His hands had healed years ago, leaving thin scars that didn't hinder his work. His brown hair now had silver strands at the temples. His face carried lines of expression that weren't there when we met. He was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. A little girl ran across the garden in front of us, chasing butterflies with laughter that filled the air with joy. In her hands, she held a small wooden fox that Elias had carved especially for her. "Elias," her voice was sharp, curious, "were you a great warrior when you were young?" Elias stopped carving, a gentle smile forming on his lips. He looked at me, and I saw there everything we had built together. All the pain, all the healing, all the love. "No," he replied, turning back to the girl. "I wasn't a great warrior. I just learned to listen." A pause, his green eyes shining, and when I heard the right howl, I found my home. The girl wrinkled her nose, clearly not understanding. "What howl?" Elias pointed to where I sat, my large body occupying half the porch bench, my face marked with scars that no longer caused me shame. "Hers." The girl ran off to play again, satisfied with the answer even without fully grasping it. I leaned over and kissed Elias's temple, feeling his scent wrap around me as it always did. Wood. resin, cold smoke. And now, beneath all that, something that was only mine. The smell of home. In the distance, in the forest surrounding our valley, a howl rose. Not of war or fear, of peace, of belonging, of a pack that had learned that the strongest wolves were not the ones who roared loudest, but the ones who chose to protect instead of destroy. I raised my voice and answered. And when the pack's chorus joined us, echoing through the valley we had built together, I knew that the wolf who had been a weapon, her entire life had finally found what she had always sought. Not a battle to win, a home to protect. Thank you for being here and for joining me for another story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you want, leave your comment. I love reading what you feel and think after each episode. Thank you for the love, and see you in the next story.